Do me a huge favor for a second. Look down.
Okay.
Take a look at the floor. If you're commuting, maybe it's the gritty rubber mat of a train car.
Here.
If you're listening at home, maybe it's a rug. Maybe it's that generic gray runner you bought online because it was on sale. Or maybe it's this beautiful hand-knotted thing you inherited.
Right. It seems like the most mundane object in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It is, quite literally, the thing we walk all over.
it's the background noise of interior design.
And it's usually the absolute last thing you'd think about when you hear the word geopolitics.
Precisely. But here is the kicker. As of this week, specifically as of February 6, 2026, that rug under your feet has effectively become a diplomatic bargaining chip.
I know it sounds a little hyperbolic,
It does.
but it's real. The United States and India just unveiled a new interim trade framework. Now, usually when I say trade framework, I can hear people clicking away to a different show.
Oh, instantly. It implies a stack of PDFs that, nobody ever reads.
Usually, yes. But this particular stack of PDFs is a fascinating case study. It is effectively redrawing the map of global supply chains.
So we aren't just talking about shipping containers moving from point A to point B.
No, we are talking about a fundamental shift in where things are made. And specifically, we're looking at the textile and carpet industries.
So today, we're going on a deep dive into the geopolitics of rugs. We're pulling from these brand new 2026 trade policy documents. We've got situation reports coming out of Indian export hubs like Panipat.
And we're looking at global market forecasts all the way out to 2030. Our mission here is to really understand why the U.S. government suddenly cares so much about Indian carpets and what that tells us about the future of the global economy.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the headline event, February 6, 2026. The U.S. and India shake hands on this interim framework. So why is this a big deal? I mean, usually these interim things are just minor adjustments, right?
This is much more than a minor adjustment. To understand the weight of this deal, you have to look at where we were just a year ago in 2025.
Right.
The situation for Indian exports to the U.S. was, frankly, brutal. We were seeing what the industry calls punitive tariffs.
I saw the number in the notes, and I honestly did a double take. I thought it was a typo. 50%.
Yes, as high as 50% on certain products.
That is just wild. Let's just pause on that math for a second. So if I'm a rug maker in India, and I make a rug that costs, say, $100 to produce,
Yeah,
by the time it hits the U.S. border, it's suddenly $150 just because of tax.
exactly. And that doesn't even include shipping or the retailer's markup.
Wow.
And that price hike, it either gets passed on to the consumer or, and this is more likely, it eats into the margin so deeply that the business just becomes unviable. American retailers just stop buying.
Because the math just doesn't work anymore.
The math doesn't work, and we saw the result of that.
Mm.
In 2025, exports from this sector dropped about 9%.
9%.
We're talking about a dip down to $735 million.
Yeah.
That is a significant chunk of money just disappearing from the industry.
So 2025 was the bad year.
It was a very, very challenging period, and it highlighted just how vulnerable these export-oriented craft sectors are.
Mm.
You have to remember, a lot of the carpet industry in India isn't, giant automated factories with robots.
Right. It's labor-intensive, hand-knotted work, real people making things by hand.
Exactly. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent livelihoods.
So when you slap a 50% tariff on that, you aren't just hurting a corporation's bottom line.
You're impacting thousands of artisans in places like Panipat and Badohi. But here's the aha moment with this new framework.
Okay.
The proposal unveiled this week looks to lower that tariff significantly down to around 18% on most Indian imports.
From 50% to 18, that is a massive cut. That's not a correction, that's a rescue package.
It's a huge relief. The sources from the Indian carpet sector are describing it as a signal for recovery. They're expecting this to essentially rescue those thousands of labor-intensive businesses that were, on the brink.
But I have to play the skeptic here. Why? Why would the U.S. just decide, okay, we're done with the 50% tax, let's make it nice and easy? Is this just out of the goodness of their hearts?
Well, rarely is trade policy about the goodness of anyone's heart. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the documents are actually quite explicit about the goal.
And what's that?
The phrase they use is realigning global supply chains. The goal is to move toward what they call diversified sourcing strategies, and
There it is, the elephant in the room. Or maybe the dragon in the room.
the U.S. That's the strategic imperative. But you can't just stop buying things. Need an alternative source.
You can't just tell Walmart or Target to have empty shelves.
India is positioning itself to be that alternative, especially in textiles and home decor. By dropping the tariffs, the U.S. is effectively saying, we want to make it easier for American companies to buy from India instead of China.
So the rug is just a pawn in a much bigger chess game.
In a way, yes. But for the people in Panapat or the buyers in New York, that pawn is their entire livelihood. It's a strategic realignment.
Mm.
The tariff cut is the lubricant that makes that China plus one strategy actually financially viable for American companies.
Okay, so since we brought up the big players, let's map this out. Because I think there's a misconception that, a rug is a rug is a rug. Like, if we stop buying from China and start buying from India, is it just the same product coming from a different port?
Not at all.
Oh.
And that is a crucial nuance in the source material. If you look at the global landscape, you have these massive regional specializations,
Oh.
Asia as a whole. So if you combine China, India, Japan, South Korea, that accounts for over 70% of regional production.
70%. So the odds are, if you're standing on a rug right now, it came from Asia.
Highly likely.
Yeah.
But there is a distinct split in who makes what. China's still the manufacturing leader, no doubt about it, but they dominate a specific sector.
Which is?
Synthetic, tufted, and machine-made carpets.
Okay, so that's your wall-to-wall carpeting in an office building. Or maybe those durable, lower-cost area rugs you buy for a dorm room because you know someone is going to spill something on it.
Right. High volume, mechanized production, very consistent, very standardized. India, on the other hand, dominates the hand-knotted and hand-woven sector.
Ah.
They are exporting these craft-heavy goods to over 100 countries.
So if China is the factory, India is the artisan workshop.
Broadly speaking, yes, and this distinction is really important because the U.S. trade deal is targeting that specific Indian strength. It's not necessarily trying to replace China's machine output directly with Indian machine output.
It's boosting the availability of that handcrafted tier.
Or at least ensuring that if you want a hand-knotted rug, you aren't paying a 50% penalty on it. Because look at who is buying all of this. The consumption numbers tell the classic story of global economy.
Let me guess, North America.
North America consumes about 35% of the global supply. Europe consumes about 25%.
So the West buys and the East makes.
That is the fundamental dynamic. And that's why these trade deals are so critical. If you are a retailer in the U.S., say, a buyer for a big home goods chain, you are entirely dependent on these flows.
And when a tariff jumps to 50%, your business model breaks.
It breaks. You can't pass all that cost onto the customer. They just won't buy the rug. When it drops to 18%, suddenly you have breathing room again.
It really just highlights how interconnected this all is. A signature on a piece of paper in Washington determines if a loom in India keeps spinning.
That is the definition of globalization.
But this is where it gets really interesting to me. We've talked about the two giants, the U.S. and India, but the sources mention that the industry isn't just sitting around waiting for these two governments to sign papers. There's a lot of scrambling going on elsewhere.
Absolutely. I mean, reliance on one big buyer like the U.S. is risky. We just saw that with the 2025 tariffs.
Right. If the U.S. decides to tax you, you suffer.
So the exporters in places like Panapat, which is India's major home decor hub, they're actively pursuing what they call alternate markets.
So diversification isn't just for the buyers, it's for the sellers too.
Precisely. They don't want to be so vulnerable to U.S. policy shocks in the future. But what fascinates me is how smaller nations are finding ways to compete in this environment. Like, look at Bahrain.
Bahrain. I have to admit, when I think of the global carpet trade, Bahrain is not the first dot on the map for me.
And that's why their strategy is so interesting. They recently announced a policy allowing the duty-free import of raw materials.
Okay, explain why that matters. Walk me through the economics of that.
Well, think about the cost of making a rug. A huge chunk of it is the raw material, the wool, the yarn, the dyes.
Of course.
If a factory in Bahrain can import those raw ingredients without paying any tax on them, their production costs drop significantly.
So they can sell the finished product cheaper.
Right. It is a signal to global manufacturers. Come set up shop here. It's cheaper to make things here because we aren't taxing your inputs.
It's a different level than the U.S. India tariff deal, but it aims for the same goal. Competitiveness.
That is smart. It's like playing Moneyball with manufacturing. They found an inefficiency taxes on raw materials and exploited it.
It is. And then you have the success story of Nepal. This was one of the most surprising details in the research for me.
What's happening in Nepal?
So Nepal's carpet industry is seeing rapid growth, but it's not because of some big government treaty or a raw material tax break.
So what's driving it?
It's driven by e-commerce.
Really? buying rugs online. I mean, I guess we buy everything online now, but for something so tactile.
Yep. Nepal is exporting hand-woven goods to over 50 countries. And get this, the U.S. takes about 60% of their exports. But a huge driver here is digital platforms. It's allowing them to bypass the traditional middlemen.
That makes so much sense. Historically, if you were a weaver in the Himalayas, you had to sell to a local aggregator who sold to an exporter who sold to an
Or
importer,
was sold to a shop, and everyone took a cut.
and the weaver at the start got pennies on the dollar.
Exactly. Now, with high-res video and digital showrooms, that weaver can show the rug directly to a buyer or a boutique owner in California. It's democratizing access.
It really is. Digital trade platforms are allowing these smaller players to reach buyers directly. It creates resilience. If a physical trade route closes or a big retailer goes bust,
The digital storefront is still open. I love that image. You've got this massive geopolitical treaty on one side, armies of lawyers and diplomats, and then you've got a guy in Nepal with a smartphone and a loom on the other, both changing the same industry.
it just shows that there isn't one single way to win in the global market. You can win with scale, like China. You can win with diplomacy, like India. You can win with tax policy, like Bahrain. Or you can win with tech, like Nepal.
So we've covered the now, the deal is signed, or at least the framework is there, the players are moving. What does the future floor look like? If we look ahead to 2030, are we just going to see more of the same?
The short answer is more, but different.
Mm-hmm.
The market outlook is bullish. It's projected to reach roughly $59 billion by 2030.
That is a lot of rugs.
It is. And it's driven by urbanization, more people renovating homes, just general demand. But the kind of rugs people want is changing dramatically.
Let me guess. Sustainability.
We are seeing a massive shift towards sustainability.
I feel like we hear that in every deep dive we do. Tech, cars, food. But is it real here? Or is it just greenwashing, slapping a green sticker on a plastic rug?
That's a fair skepticism,
Oh.
but it's becoming very real because the buyers are demanding it. The stats show that about 71% of Asian buyers now prioritize eco-friendly carpets.
71%. That's a tipping point. That's no longer a niche for, a certain type of buyer. It's the mainstream preference.
Exactly. So what does a sustainable carpet even look like? It looks like innovation. In India, makers are increasingly using recycled cotton blends. So instead of growing new cotton, which is very water intensive, they are repurposing waste from the textile industry. And in South Korea, brands are leading the charge in carbon neutral production.
Carbon neutral carpets. That sounds like sci-fi.
It's becoming the gold standard. And it's not just consumer preference, it's regulatory pressure. The sources mention that while there aren't specific carpet laws yet, broader EU textile sustainability laws are setting a precedent.
Ah, the Brussels effect. The EU makes a rule, and everyone else has to follow it if they want to sell there.
Exactly. If you want to sell to Europe, you have to prove your supply chain is ethical and green. You need the receipts.
And if a factory in Panapat has to clean up its act to sell to Berlin, they might as well use that selling point when they sell to New York.
It lists the standard everywhere.
And I noticed the research mentioned technology beyond just e-commerce. Smart carpets. Please tell me my floor isn't going to start listening to my conversations.
Not listening, but maybe feeling. We're seeing the rise of smart carpets, mostly in the commercial space. Imagine flooring that has sensors woven into the backing to track foot traffic patterns.
Oh, like a heat map for a retail store to see which aisles people walk down the most.
Exactly. Or custom printed carpets, where the design is printed on demand for a specific branding event. It's not just a floor covering anymore. It's a dynamic data point.
That is wild. It's amazing how much technology is creeping into something so ancient.
It really is. And yet, despite all this digital talk, Nepal selling online, smart carpets, the physical meeting place still matters. The sources highlighted Heimtextil 2026 in Frankfurt.
That's the big trade show, right? The Super Bowl of textiles.
The biggest. It just happened, and they actually expanded the carpet segment.
That's interesting. You'd think with Zoom and online shopping and digital samples, trade shows would be dying. Why fly all the way to Germany?
You would think so. But when you're dealing with textiles, touch, feel, texture, you just can't fully digitize that. You can't touch a PDF.
Good point.
The fact that the show is growing proves that networking and physical interaction remain vital. It's where these new sustainable materials get showcased. You have to feel the recycled cotton to believe it's soft.
So to bring this all back home, literally to our living rooms, we started with a piece of paper signed in Washington and New Delhi in February 2026.
Right. An interim framework to lower tariffs from 50% all the way down to 18%.
Which is saving the bacon of Indian exporters in Panipat who had a really rough 2025.
And it's helping the U.S. diversify away from China, fulfilling a major strategic goal.
Meanwhile, Bahrain is cutting taxes on raw materials to attract factories, and Nepal is selling to the world via the internet, bypassing all the old gatekeepers.
And everyone is racing toward a $59 billion market that is greener, cleaner, and more high-tech than ever before.
It's just amazing how much complexity is hidden in such a simple object.
That's the beauty of trade. Every object tells a story of where it came from, the politics that allowed it to get there, and the technology used to sell it.
So here is the big question for you, the listener. We've talked about trade deals rewriting where our goods come from to avoid over-reliance on one superpower.
And we've talked about sustainability laws rewriting what those goods are made of.
We're seeing a move away from the purely cheapest possible option model.
Right. So are we seeing the end of the cheap disposable era of home decor? Are we returning to a world where goods are maybe a little harder to make, maybe a little more expensive, but they're built to last?
If the trade barriers are high for cheap goods and the environmental standards are high for disposable goods,
The logical outcome is quality. You might buy fewer things, but there'll be better things.
something to think about the next time you're shopping for a rug. You might just be buying a piece of the New World Order.
Indeed.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.